Alright guys, so for today's video, we're going to be talking about a subject that might get suppressed yet again on YouTube. I did a video not too long ago, which I'll leave in the description below, but YouTube basically shadow banned it looked like, or suppressed it severely. But the reason I wanted to talk about this again was because now we've had some committee hearings where we've actually called in some of these doctors to ask them about this so-called safe supply. And I just want you to listen to what these doctors say and how like condescending and full of themselves they are.
Just so we're all very aware, we have a convention in this committee so that if someone is asking a question, what we suggest is that the response is the same length as the question, and the member will have the opportunity to interrupt you should they desire at that same length. So we will stick to that convention as per the usual chair. So with that being said, let's get to the first round of questions. We'll begin with Ms. Goodridge. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
I'm going to start out. My first question is for you, Dr. Sereda. New information has recently been released that corroborates previous reporting that there's mass safe supply diversion happening near the Chapman's Pharmacy close to your clinic. Are you aware of this diversion near Chapman's Pharmacy?
A question for you as well, Ms. Goodridge. What evidence has been released showing this?
It was in a series of tweets from one of the journalists, Adam Zivo, and it was put out already today.
Okay. So, I mean, safe supply clinicians, we rely on good research and published evidence and not on anecdotes and tweets on the platform of social media, Twitter X.
Now we're currently less than 2 minutes into the video, and I'm sure you want to punch this doctor in the face just like I do. She's very condescending. She talks about how anecdotal evidence isn't something they look at, yet then later on gives anecdotes of her own situations, but we'll get there when we do. But I want to play some clips that we just came across from the last video talking about this exact thing.
But there were risks too. Namely diversion, where some of the drugs are making their way to people without prescriptions. CBC News spoke to a drug user who says it's all too common, mainly because the safe supply isn't strong enough.
Anytime anybody on methadone asks their doctor, please give me a safe supply, they're just selling it and they're going to buy fentanyl.
Despite some of the risks, Dr. Henry says it's time to expand.
Now, she might look at him and say, well, this is just anecdotal evidence from him. Yet, the doctor that was on the panel with Dr. Henry, who was saying that they need to expand it, also acknowledges it in this clip.
It also acknowledges that diversion, people selling or giving away their prescribed supply, is happening.
Diversion in and of itself isn't something we should think of as good or bad. Diversion is something we should think of as in terms of its unmet needs. So diversion happens because people's needs are not being met in other ways.
So as you can clearly see there, diversion is happening. Now, in regards to if this is happening near this specific doctor's location, I can't really answer that directly, but diversion is a thing within the safer supply, community or whatever you want to call it. But as she continues to answer this question and gets cut off, the chair allows her to continue for a little bit, and then she gives an own anecdote of her own about this reporter who made the report from the National Post.
Okay, thank you. So, are you aware?
Excuse me, Ms. Goodridge. If she had more, we'll give her another 20 seconds, please.
And so Mr. Zivo is a columnist for the National Post who has dipped his toes into this for the past 8 or 9 months. And he certainly, early in his writing about safe supply expressed his desire to burn the whole system down. So I'm not sure that he's a terribly credible source of information that we want to rely on in this committee. In addition, Mr. Zivo has visited Intercommunity Health Center, where he was actually a very bullying presence to my patients. There is a gate just outside my clinic door that is 3 feet from my clinic door. I'm not finished, Ms. Goodridge.
It doesn't really matter whether you're finished or not.
Mr. Zivo blocked access to healthcare through
I'm
the
sorry,
only
Dr.
door to my
Sereda, I
clinic.
think I made you aware very clear of the convention we have in this committee. I really request that you respect that. I've done that with respect to Ms. Goodridge. So again, let's be respectful today, everyone. Thank you.
You can start to see the hypocrisy with this lady, how she says you can't take anecdotal evidence, yet then gives an anecdote about this reporter blocking people at her clinic. However, Another conservative colleague pushes back at her and say, listen, you didn't really answer the question. And she chooses to say this.
Dr. Sarita, I don't believe you answered the question from my colleague earlier. Are you aware that there is safe supply being diverted at Chapman's Pharmacy across the way from your office? Yes or no?
It's not a yes and no answer.
It is a yes or no. Are you aware or no?
I'm going to decline to answer a complicated question.
Okay, that's fine.
Without being given a chance for a complicated answer.
Okay.
Now, I don't know about you, but that seems like a pretty yes or no kind of answer to me. Either yes, you have seen it or you haven't, or yes, you know about it or you don't. But she always talks about how it's a complicated situation or a complicated answer throughout this whole thing. And as he decides to move on to the next set of questions about, well, do you think that diversions could potentially give drugs or put drugs in the hands of people who aren't prescribed or even the youth? She then says, there's no evidence of this. And he pushes back with, well, what's the leading cause of death here? And she goes, well, fentanyl.
Do you agree that it's possible that diverted opioids are ending up in the hands of people that they aren't prescribed to, or even children? Yes or no?
We have no evidence that they are ending up in the hands of children. We have no scientific data that supports those assertions.
What's the leading cause of death in the province of British Columbia for youth?
It is overdose from fentanyl.
Thank you.
From fentanyl.
Okay.
Well, why don't I play back what that gentleman just finished telling us earlier?
Like, I mean, we could put oxygen on her if fire came.
It's the #1 cause of death in BC for those between the ages of 10 and 59.
Time anybody on methadone asks their doctor, please give me a safe supply. They're just selling it, and they're going to buy fentanyl.
So she states that there's not any data to show this, yet when he asks what's the #1 cause of death in youth, she knows that it's fentanyl. And this former safe supply user tells us that they're taking the methadone, selling it for fentanyl. Well, then, yeah, wouldn't diversion potentially get into the hands of these children, which is causing them to die? I wonder. But then the next set of questions leads into this article here, where it says, mental health minister says safer supply drug concerns rooted in stigma and fear. And that's exactly what this doctor starts to state, how she's more concerned about the conversation around it and not so much divergence itself.
Does diversion of safe supply worry you?
I think more important than diversion is the discourse around the diversion that's happening in the media. And so diversion is it is complicated, and it requires more than a 60-second answer if I can finish.
I appreciate that. I have a very limited amount of time, so I asked really quick, simple questions and wanted simple, quick answers.
Now, unfortunately, I don't think she's ever going to get a quick and simple answer with this doctor here, seeing as everything's complicated when she's talking. Yet Ms. Goodrich continues to ask her about fentanyl in regards to children. Now, this doctor goes on some spiel about, how there's protocols and this and this and that. And she says, okay, well, again, do you think that kids should be allowed to take fentanyl? And she says, well, if the options are they take the bad stuff or the regulated stuff, yeah, let's give them the regulated stuff, which I don't think is the answer. I think we should just be trying to limit the amount of fentanyl that kids have access to. Yet if they're getting fentanyl because of this divergence thing, then it sounds like the safe supply is not actually working.
BC's recently developed some protocols that allow for recreational fentanyl to be prescribed to children in the guise of safe supply. What are your thoughts on this?
I think the BC CSU has very carefully consulted experts, both in who provides addiction care, harm reduction care, and the care of children with substance use disorders. And so I'm not aware that any children have accessed this protocol to date. But if you read the protocol, it is the same as any other kind of complicated healthcare for children in Canada, whereas two experts need to agree. The person needs to be carefully assessed for the risk and any benefit of treatment. And in some children who are dependent on the toxic, illicit fentanyl street supply, physicians who are caring for them can make expert decisions in what they need for their health care.
So do you think that we should prescribe recreational fentanyl to children?
I think if children are at risk of dying from the toxic street supply, which we know over 90% of deaths in youth are from, which is illicit fentanyl.
Thank you.
At the end there, she states that 90% of those deaths are from bad fentanyl, which leads me to believe that 10% of the deaths are from the good fentanyl, which in my opinion is still really bad. Obviously not as bad as 90%, but if the clean stuff is still killing 10% of the youth, I think that's something we should check in on. And as Mr. Doherty then asks her about traceability, putting tracers in these drugs so that we can see if divergence is happening, this is what she has to say to that.
Do you support the improved traceability measures of so-called safe supply?
I don't. I think that's a slippery slope around marginalized
Why would that be a
communities.
slippery slope?
We don't put tracers in any other kind of medication.
So can diversion?
Why would we stigmatize people who use drugs? Okay. Why would we assume that people who use drugs have nefarious intention with their medications?
Now, I think it would be safe to assume that a large portion of these individuals are interacting in this nefarious actions that she's talking about, seeing as we have this former safe supply user essentially telling us how it works. You know, they get the good drugs, they sell them for the bad drugs, and Bob's your uncle. But in this future committee hearing, we have a Liberal Party asking another individual a set of questions about, you know, what they see for the future of the opioid problem and what our next steps should be. And this is what she has to say.
Can you shed some light around how these available treatment options, along with a safer supply, will be able to help present an alternative to the situation that we are, the dilemma that we are facing with?
Yeah, so I think I echo everybody on the panel that it is critical we respond with a wide variety of different opioid agonist medications and options for people, and that we need to dramatically expand access to those medications as first-line treatment for opioid use disorder. But we also know that there is some patients for which those medications are either not an option or something they've tried and has not been successful for them. And I don't think it's okay to just say, well, I'm sorry, that's all we've got for you. I think it is reasonable to prescribe people prescription opioid medications in an attempt to stabilize them and to support them and to reduce their extreme risk of overdose death from consuming fentanyl and other toxic street drugs. So I don't think that these are opposing things. I think we absolutely need on-demand treatment, high-quality evidence-based treatment using the full range of modalities, including injectable opioid agonist treatment, which really has not been expanded at all in our country. But that being said, there will be people that, for whatever reason, those medications are not an option or have not worked for them, and we can't abandon that population. We really need to support everybody we can to stay alive. It's just not acceptable to have this level of death in our country for something that is ultimately preventable.
So not only does she admit that there is some sort of dilemma here with the opioid situation, she's also advocating that we expand it and we provide more opioids to the individuals who are addicted to it, and even different modalities like injectable versions of it, which to me just doesn't sound like the correct path to go down. You know, in Portugal, they've decriminalized basically all the drugs, and you've seen a big decrease in, you know, drug-related issues, but that's because they provide them with other sources of help, like counseling, mental health, all that kind of stuff. And this just sounds like you're just going to give them the drugs that they need, but a safer, cleaner version of it, but that doesn't help them break the cycle of addiction. So I don't see how this helps. But after this, she then starts talking about how a good portion of these deaths are due to inhalation from smoking these drugs, and that we need better supervised spaces and to allow them to do the drugs inside these places.
I also want to highlight too, and I'm not sure if the committee has heard this evidence, but we know in Alberta and BC that the majority of people who die from drug poisoning are dying after smoking drugs. And yet supervised consumption services across the country, very few of them actually allow people to smoke drugs within them. And so a pretty quick change that could happen is for the federal government to subsidize supervised consumption services to make the renovations required to be able to accommodate supervised inhalation. And I think that would have an ancillary benefit of bringing more of the public public drug use that is a concern across the country due to a whole host of factors, including a lack of housing. But it would bring that public drug use inside.
Now, I do find it funny that she talks about these supervised consumption centers, as an American YouTuber just went to BC to see the drug epidemic or drug crisis there. And this is what he came across when they went into one of those.
Vancouver has also implemented what's known as a safe injection site. A safe, clean, and supervised place. Little did I know, Kevin snuck into one last night, and here's how it looked.
Want me to do a smoke show? Smoke show time, baby.
It didn't seem clean, safe, or supervised from the little that Kevin saw.
And yeah, I'd probably have to agree with him that didn't look very supervised to me. So yeah, you may be getting them off the street so that they're not visible to the public, but that doesn't mean that you're helping these people. Look at them. These people are zombies. And again, they're smoking in there, they're passed out, they're dirty, it's gross in there, and there's no supervision for these consumption centers, or at least in that one in particular. Who knows how many other ones are like that. But again, this is just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think about this situation in the comment section below. As I said, this video might not make it very far because of YouTube, but you know, if you made it this far, I do appreciate it. Please hit the subscribe button, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.